I have my couples watch these. It doesn't matter. We're all emotional beings. We all have management of emotion. We all have emotional balance. We all have emotion that leads to behavior, which is a whole hour I could talk just about that. So we have a thought and a feeling and a behavior that comes into the brain, and that rotates out, hundreds of thousands of millions of times a day. Every time we have something come in, we have a thought that leads us to an emotion, that leads us to a behavior. So this is why emotional regulation is awareness. So we have to be aware, find awareness, then manage it, and then apply the skills. So awareness, this is how I teach every single webinar. Here's awareness, here's the definition, here's what's going on. Here's how we can face it, manage it a little bit, and then here's some skills to assist. Doesn't mean it's always going to work. Doesn't mean that it's going to be a magic, recipe, because it doesn't work that way. But these are just ideas, right? So here's to assist relationships and self and well-being. That's the point of emotional regulation. A jerk quality. It's out of a book called How to Avoid Falling in Love with a Jerk. One of the jerk qualities is someone that dangerously lacks emotional control. So we don't want to be around jerks. We don't want to be a jerk. We want to be able to manage our manage our emotions, which lead us to a behavior. So I taught anger management for over 7 years, 8 years, including an internship for the court system. So yeah, when you get a charge, you have that says, oh, I need to manage my emotions better, and I need to learn how to do that. So, and anger management is a great thing to learn. You never know when you can reach a 10. We're going to talk about that. So awareness, identifying the emotion of self and others. So others is empathy. You have to be able to identify mindfully in the present, identify primary and secondary emotions, and then understanding the process of secondary emotions. Okay, this is my favorite thing, primary, secondary, and I call them third party emotions. And I've got these handouts in this PowerPoint for you. Steps to measuring and managing it. So we have to measure it after we know what a secondary emotion, processing and understanding it. It doesn't say do something about it, but it's like measuring it and then managing it. And that's the little bit of what to do about it. And of course, emotions are chemicals. Okay, so chemicals are stored in the brain, in the body, in the muscles, in the gut. I promise you, all these are stored. Chemicals are stored as trauma. So emotions are chemicals. Trauma is emotions that come from trauma. So stepping into the unknown is judgment on the past, right? So that's that post-traumatic. And when you do choose to change, if you do step back, go forward into what those past chemicals have taught you, what they need to teach you, what you need to learn from that, that's what that's talking about a little bit there. And the stepping stones, I love pictures, I love rocks, I love water, I love that, And so it's always a visual for me. So here's a stepping stone. If you just tried to cross that little river, it might not be too fun, but man, when I can jump across rocks, it sure makes it better to get to the other side. So each rock is always a stepping stone into the unknown sometimes, but it's difficult, but it's worth it. So if we go into what emotional intelligence is a little bit, I wait for my computer to catch up to me and then I click on it. So go back to this. So emotional intelligence. So one part of this, I have Daniel Goleman referenced at the back of this PowerPoint, but he just has 5 pillars of emotional intelligence in his book. And so, of course, one of his is self-regulation. So I just have that highlighted. He's got great books in that. So, and I talk about that also, emotional intelligence, in emotional intelligence part 1 and 2 on the webinar workshops on YouTube that we've put all of our workshops on the YouTube channel. So if you want to be more emotional intelligent as a human, as an adult, I refer people to that all the time because it's super, super important. It's actually scientifically more important than IQ is to be emotionally intelligent. And you cannot de-escalate your child if you're escalated. So you cannot escalate, if you're escalated, you cannot de-escalate a child, a coworker, your spouse, your partner, none of those things, because we're not self-regulating and we're not in the frontal lobe. So that's what the point of this is understanding what is going on. And if you're intelligent in that, you'll have way better success. So, excuse me. So if you are emotionally regulated, children understand the meaning of their relationships with others. Okay. We wouldn't have bullying. We wouldn't have major, issues with relationships very young, as a very young child. And we build mental resilience and their identities. Okay. So it's way more important than IQ is what I'm telling you. Statistically, kids who do not have the ability to manage their feelings, of course, before their behavior, because remember, behavior comes after feelings, and they have a harder time making decisions, self-regulating, making friends, regulating anger, aggression, withdrawal, and anxiety. They just have a lot more issues. So if they do have emotional intelligence and regulation, they have better attention, problem-solving skills, performance, of course. They know how to delay gratification. That's my favorite thing. I talk about that all the time in the Road Less Traveled that talks about that. That's not quoted in the back of this book, in this PowerPoint, but it's a book about how to teach your children how to delay gratification. So kids have a better problem solving, meaning they're going to have better long-term goals. They're going to look at their future and have a lot more hope. So lots of good reasons are why we need to be emotional regulated. Here's my handout on the wheel. I have this in several other webinars about emotions. Always, I pass this out a lot because this is my own little, I had to make my own a long time ago because it just has to be very simple. In the primary emotion is those middle: happy, sad, mad, scared, peaceful, surprised. And then the secondary emotions are all these words. If you feel worthwhile, creative, trusted, motivated, respected, appreciated, you're in the happy section. And you have worth and a higher purpose and you feel understood. So feeling understood is a universal need. It's way deep. So, and then if you're on the other side, you're in some sort of loss, grief, and trauma, and powerless. So when you're in all four of these, by the way, if you look at your life and you go, wow, when was I in loss, grief, and trauma all at the same time? And then I felt super powerless. So when you've lost somebody close to you and you feel powerless about what you can do, we felt a lot of this in the COVID era, so powerless. If you're in all four of those, that's called crisis. We're in a crisis now. So just a little handout so you can identify emotions, because this is part of this webinar is we've got to label it and identify them first too, to regulate them. So we're not taking away emotions, we're regulating and managing. We don't take away emotions. We don't shame emotion. We emotionally coach. So this is an example. Primary emotions: sad, mad, surprise, happy, shame. Okay, so here's shame. It is a primary emotion. Brene Brown talks a lot about shame. I have her quoted in the back here. If you want to go into more of that, I have a shame parenting workshop that's super good about that, like how to prevent shame parenting. And it all has to do with emotions. So that if you have shame, I am a bad person. I didn't just do something bad, that's guilt. I am actually a bad person. Then you have worthlessness and I feel weak. And then that's some sort of loss, grief, and powerless. That definitely goes into that. So it all ties together. And And then the next one, for example, is happy. Okay, so we're hopeful, safe. Oh, we have worth, higher purpose. You know, we have an understanding. We feel understood, and we have an understanding. So those are just some examples of that, how that leads to the rest. So this is a secondary emotion example. So I'm, you know, super frustrated, insecure, jealous. Those are secondary emotions for mad. So you're outraged and resentment, lonely, worthlessness, you know, comes along, annoyed and hurt. The resentment's in a root issue. That one's a deep one. Resentment comes from all of these things. So we see a lot, I see a lot of resentment that's deep, from trauma and from relationships. Okay, so this is the other handout. These are just in here. You can print them off if you want, or you can go to my website where I have all these. And you can always chat. By the way, I'm going to take a break here. So you can always chat a question. You can always send something along the way here. I can always look at those too. Make sure you can hear me and everything's going good. So this is my handout that I went with the wheel. So this is what we have to do. First observe, then we have to experience, we accept, we go into radical acceptance actually. Then we have to self-talk, and then we practice. So this is just the basics of how to be emotionally intelligent and how to find your emotions, how the cycle works, and then we do this all day long. So the point, this is the positive ones, like how do we experience it? Well, we don't push it and block it. We use our 5 senses for that. We try not to judge, and we accept the emotion, allow time for the emotion to happen. Super difficult if you don't like emotions or if you don't like your child throwing a fit in the grocery store. I get it. It's like, nope, I can't feel emotion. I can't handle that emotion. So then we don't get past experience. You see, we don't witness it. We aren't present in it. We don't allow it to happen. And I don't know about you, but you know, if you've done Brene Brown's research, I wasn't emotionally coached. I didn't get past like one, you know, most of the time. You know, I do a little better than the gatherer, right? The nurturer. In Brene Brown's research of years and years of like interviewing a lot of people, men were not emotionally coached as much, you know, back in the day. So of course we're doing lots better of not shaming and doing shame parenting about emotion, but we still need to do better, lots better. So this is the release of the fight flight. We rate the emotion 1 to 10, 10 being a strong. We label it, and then we know what our physical body is doing. So we'll go over that a little bit. Okay, so just went over it. So yeah, daily track. This is the point down here. It's like how to be balanced in this. Number 1 is to track a little bit. You can keep track with your kid. I use a whiteboard, then you can erase it. You can do a day at a time, you can do a week at a time, doesn't matter. Labeling them. I try to get a kid that I'm working with in therapy, we get 10 to 30 labels of emotions, really good. If I have a kiddo that can give me, a pretty young kiddo, give me 10 secondary emotions that they had in the last week or two, amazing. I mean, they really can do it. 30 is for adults. We want to know what we're having. We should have 20 to 30 emotions every single day without, you know, even trying. It should be very simple to observe those and have those. All types, all kinds of emotions on all of the wheel. So you can keep track of those though. That helps you see where you're at. See if you can find them and track them and be present. The second one, that experience part, this is super, you know, important. That all emotions are just signs. They're just telling us something. And we've got to listen to our body and we got to listen to what's going on. And so writing down like what you smell, hear, and taste and stuff like that, making sure we're present, those go with writing down too. Okay, so I'm just going to skip to 5, practice 5, because so there's 3, you know, and 4 in there too, and the, you know, but I'm just going to talk about this one for a minute and then go into the rest of this PowerPoint. So the emotional regulation, okay, in that handout that I showed you the cycle. Okay, this is step 5. This is the practice part. So logic and emotion together is wise mind. We put it all together. We put all emotion and logic together and make a decision. The new skills I'm going to talk about in this PowerPoint about doing 10-minute distractions. I have a lot of 10-minute distractions in my anxiety part 2 tools. If you want to watch that, if you haven't already. Mind dumping, calling someone, walking, breathing, you know, just 10-minute distractions. And I'm going to talk a lot more about that later. Vulnerability. So it takes courage, creativity, connection, compassion. That's Brene Brown stuff right there. And I always add creativity. She talks about creativity in Gifts of Imperfection. Over here, owning our stories and loving ourselves through the process is the bravest thing we can ever do. That's vulnerability. That's Gifts of Imperfection. That's courage. We've got to be creative. We have to connect and we have to have compassion. What the brain needs is these other C's, I call them. Number 1 is we have to have basic, you know, the basic C's. The first one is we have to have clarity. So first we have to have clarity. So that was step 1. We have to know the emotion. We have to clarify it. We have to label it. We have to put a number on it. Then we connect the dots, so connection, and we have to have connections with humans. And then we have control. So if we don't have control over those 2 things, we don't have a better, you know, we don't have a better behavior. So we have to have clarity. We have to connect the dots. Then we have control over it. And then we can have, you know, courage and connection, compassion about being vulnerable in our emotions. Vulnerability is emotions. So we have to have a higher purpose, know what our higher purpose is. In that, what is our higher purpose of regulating our emotions? So we're more present, so we have better, you know, outcomes, so we don't rage, so we don't hit the wall, so we don't kick our sister, you know, whatever it is, so we can, I guess, you know, obtain normacy in society, so we don't have, you know, anger management problems later. Who knows? Whatever your higher purpose is in doing this for you, your kids, or whoever you work with. And then you have to have openness. You have to have a growth mindset. You have to repair, start over, do your best. I was just listening to a TED Talk on my lunch, and she was talking about parenting. It was very interesting, about how to do your best in parenting. And sometimes, and the I don't remember her name, but the TED Talk said that we really don't have much control over how our kids turn out. I mean, and there is science to that. Lots of studies on twins. But at the same time, kids, you know, parenting and parenting styles are very important. Attunement, attachment, trauma, it's very, very important. But in the end of the day, I'm going to say, you know, at the end of the day, we don't have control over how our parenting skills have made our kids turn out. I mean, I have 1 kids. I had 25 foster kids, and I did influence. You can coach and challenge. You can entice and invite to do the things that we know is best for them, right? But at the end of the day, I mean, anybody want to have a discussion on that? I would like one. At the end of the day, do we have control over how our kids turn out? And if we kind of step back 2 feet, which I have had to learn to do and I teach others to do, if you step back 2 feet and just sit in this understanding in their space, I promise you, and therapists don't promise anything, I always say that after I say that, it works. It works to respect and value their space and just sit in their space with them. That's scientifically proven to be better, because that's empathy instead of sympathy, and have a desire to help and hold the hurt and to have their feelings and their needs met. But sitting in their space empathetically is all you can do. You can reflect, and then you can rehearse, and you can repair, and you can do the body language. But this is habit 5 from Covey, and it's my favorite habit. He's in my top 5 books. He's my top 5 authors anyway. So this is super important because remember, on that side of the wheel, you have to feel understood to have those emotions. So if you don't feel understood, you know, like we know as adults how we feel when we're not understood, valued, or respected, where we don't have space, a safe space to be in. You don't have mutual understanding with someone. You don't have to agree with them, but it's called, I can see your perspective. So you have to see other people's perspective to have any sort of understanding. And then love and belonging comes after. You have to feel understood first before you can feel loved. So this is why I go deep. This is way deeper than love and belonging. It's value. And so if you can sit in kids' space and then step back 2 feet, but still be in their space and let them work out a lot of that stuff. And that's the emotional coaching that I have that PowerPoint already up, but I do have that handout in this PowerPoint too on emotional coaching. But yeah, this is it. This is right. Intent to listen. The skill is okay, iMessages, I feel about this, you know, I see that you're this, you know, what is your needs? How are you feeling? I see that, you know, in a small child, you go through those labels of like, I see that you're super upset right now. So the minute we correct, by the way, the minute we correct the problem, right? The feeling, and someone needs to be muted. I can't see who it needs to be, but if you can hear me, mute yourself. So if there is a problem, which is a kid overreacting and the rage and the strong emotions are happening, and there's like a huge issue at school or in the grocery store or whatever, and we call that a problem, and then it's like, okay, and then that problem, then that's where we go wrong. So as parents, we say, stop it, and then we correct the emotion. Oh, you don't feel that way. You don't need to be so silly. You're not, it's not that bad. So it's undermining, but it's correcting. So the minute we correct, we do not do understanding. Does that make sense? So we don't do any of this the minute we correct. So it's always just statements. It's not a correction. That's where you can do your best to seek to intent to listen and understand is not correct. So this is how we repair that. So here's a way baby, you know, that's just running with emotions. They're driving in a runaway car with no brakes. You know, that's an uncontrollable baby crying, right? We've all seen those and had, you know, so how you respond to that is how you repair. Empathy, you have to have empathy with the related emotion.
You're good to go.
Sorry, someone needs to mute themselves.
The clamp was just a little loose.
Okay.
He tightened up the clamp, got another 3/4 of a turn out of it, pressurized the system, and didn't leak.
Mute. Button mute everyone. Let's see. I can't find here.
Isabel Piscante.
See? So yeah, someone that I don't know, I can't see the people that are talking that has their audio on. Let's see. I'm going to usually mute my
I just muted her.
Okay. Good, Heather. I was gonna say, Heather, are you there? Okay, thanks. Okay, so I just didn't want that to go. Okay, so where were we at? Empathy. So empathy, you know, we have to repair with empathy, then we paraphrase, just restate, no correction, what you see, hear, and feel. Then if we apologize, if we need to, hey, I wasn't there for you. I see that you're, you know, I did this, I did okay this way. This is with anybody and anywhere. This is how we repair anything. Because I statements is model I feel I need and I'm willing to do. That's a boundary also. It's I statements and then rebuild. So you do it again. You respect, you redo, you build the foundation. And so we rebuild that foundation with trust. And that's why we repair. But you have to have a reason to repair. If you don't need to repair, if there's nothing to repair, don't worry about it. But most of the time, there's repair that needs to happen. If you got upset at the child and then the child gets upset and then we're doing, the back and forth, the cycle, then the adult in the adult role, in the parental role, has to go through these repairs. And we do it 2 days later, we do it 5 days later, we do it 2 months later. When I hear a story in therapy about, wow, I say, I always go to the repair. Well, how did you repair it? What happened after the meltdown, after the fight, whatever, after the teenager came home late? What was it that you repaired? Because this is key. It's not about the conflict, it's how you repair it. So if we're going to emotionally regulate and help model that, we have to repair. Like I said, we can't de-escalate if we're escalated. You can't de-escalate if you're in your fight, flight, or freeze. That's your fight brain back here. And you can't help someone de-escalate if you're not in your frontal lobes. So if we're present, if we apologize, if we restate, if we're in our 5 senses, if we can repair the foundation. So when we go into repair and I say, how did you repair it? What happened? Well, we did this, and the next day we did that, and then we apologized, then we talked about it again. That's key. And if people that haven't repaired, I say, go home now and repair, and send a text and say, I really appreciated you being vulnerable with me. I'm sorry that it got out of hand. I'm sorry that I yelled at you, whatever it is. And you've got to keep repairing. That's all we can do. Again, we just have to love and stay in the space and then repair it if we need to. Okay. So the modeling is number 1. Myth of the tantrum. If we tell our kid to calm down, that's correction, and that's never going to work. Creative supportive environment works if a parent's dismissive or disapproval, which is of the emotion, especially the negative ones. I don't call emotions negative. There is no such thing as negative emotions, but a lot of books and a lot of research, they call them that. They're positive, negative emotions. I just believe that all emotions are good, and we have to live in anger. We have to have those emotions. And they just teach us something. They're not bad. They're not good or bad or negative or positive. But children tend to develop destructive emotions in these emotional regulation methods. So if you're dismissive or disapproving of their expression of emotions, children develop destructive emotional regulation. So there, I got it out. Now, last one there. So we definitely, that's a reason why we want to definitely keep emotional regulation under control to help, express the emotions, but not go into destructive. So we have to think about loss and grief a little bit, just a little plug here for this, to understand, to make sure that you understand if there's loss and grief on that side of the wheel, right? Then it's loss and grief. And we need to treat loss and grief and trauma. And these are just a list. Here's books for grieving of by age of children. So if you've got a kiddo that's grieving, make sure you get treatment and loss and grief therapy, and just understanding what is going on. Developmental trauma, health trauma, birth of a sibling is a trauma, is loss and grief. When kids move, it's huge. It's a loss and grief. These things are very traumatic. So we want them treated as soon as possible, and then you can help regulate that. And that's what therapy is about. It's about emotional regulation, not taking away the grief and trauma or loss. We wish we could just take it all away, but that's not how it works. It's about facing it till you make it. And I made that little butterfly strength thing here and put those words on there because that's from one of my private clients that was like, yeah, I'm facing it. And it's like, yeah, faking it doesn't work. Holding and stuffing your emotions doesn't work. Okay, so let's get to the tools and some activities that we can do to help our kiddo or ourselves or anybody self-regulate, also self-soothing, okay, is a really good webinar to go to. That's on YouTube now. I just did that one, like, what was it, last month or the beginning of this month? So yeah, I think it's the beginning of this month. Self-soothing. So basically, we've got to understand that self-soothing is soothing an emotion that's usually subconscious. So we do things in self-soothing urges that we don't even realize. So we got to be present when we're trying to be more mindful. This is a book. This is referenced in the back. This is, I ordered this a long time. It's a DBT group, book for children to manage mood swings, control anger, outbursts. I'm getting along with others. It's basic. I mean, and I have this idea. This is where this comes from. On this page here is this book. So I kind of just summarized a few of them. Don't let your emotions run your life for kids. Don't let your emotions run your life for kids. Yeah. It's a self-help book for parents and kids. It just has some cute ideas in it and some workshop, some handouts and, some things that you can do right in the workbook. You can draw and fill in the blanks. So creating a mindful jar, that's kind of one that's kind of combined with a few of these ideas. So get a jar and you can fill it up with the rocks, the facts, and the sand is the feelings, and you can see where that goes. And that kind of analogy is like, okay, if you put the sand in first, the rocks are not going to all fit sometimes. And then you put the rocks in and then you fill it in with the sand. You can, okay, which rocks are facts? And you can write on the rocks if you want. The facts are, I'm a good person, even though I have strong emotions. The facts are, I'm this good, positive cogs, which I call positive cognitions. And you can go through the facts because, and feelings are facts, they're your feelings, but sand is the feelings. You can do a little project with your kiddo. So the other one I really liked is create a feelings hero. So create a hero. I'm an imaginary play therapist, like create a superhero that has total control of their feelings. Total control. You can draw it, you can create it, you can make it out of clay, you can color it, you can, write a story about it, do whatever you need to do, but find a superhero. And in EMDR, when I do trauma focus, we always find a resource, a protective figure, wisdom figure, a spiritual figure, a strength figure to go with this. That's what a superhero is for like this. You can draw the anger, sadness, scared. What does it look like? And then say, okay, what does the anger look like for you? And if you sit down with your kiddo or yourself and you drew what anger looks like, when's the last time you drew as an adult? We got to get back to where our childhood, scared anger and sadness, because we really do. Do a little play therapy and sand, right? Do some therapy with, some art experience there. And you can get to a little bit more of what is going on. Instead of just talking about it, you're processing it differently. You're actually facing it too. Instead of just talking about it. So circle the words that you experience. So there's a list in here of all the words, right? So what does shame look like to you? Well, do you hide? No eye contact. You get sick. You have a lump in your throat, feeling like a bad person. You cry, wanting to disappear, being alone, fear of. So just list those things. And then it's like, okay, which one are you doing today? Right? Do you feel like a lump in your throat? I feel sick to my stomach. That's happening a lot with kids, their gut's unhealthy and they feel actually physically sick with anxiety or shame or fear. And then do the same thing with love. How do you react with love? And then list those things. What does love look like to you? When you're experiencing love or reacting to love, what does those look like? Then you write a letter, of course. write a letter to anything. Dear feelings, this is what it is today. And if you're mind dumping, then you do a dear feelings letter and you mind dump that and then you get rid of it. It's not to read again, it's not to share, it's just to dump. The last one there, what would I do if I did not act on my urge? So this one's the 10-minute distractions that we do. So an urge is anything, urge to punch a wall, urge to yell at someone, urge to do something destructive, urge to have self-soothing behavior that's not healthy. Well, if I didn't act on my urge to kick my brother, I would ride my bike, I'd play outside, I'd listen to music, I'd call a friend, and I wouldn't be in trouble. I wouldn't be in the house being in trouble. Most kids will come up with these things, and they need to come up with them ahead of time. So those can be in a jar too. So what happens in the 10-minute urge thing? So I have a jar, have you make a jar, and these activities are in there, okay? Because when we're not self-regulated, we're in the back of the brain. So we're in our fight or flight, we're in our survival brain back here. So we're not really thinking straight, and you can't reason with a child, okay? And that's what I talk about in a lot of other webinars. We don't reason with the child. So we need to understand that they're not going to be problem solving yet. We're not at problem solving at all. So if you have something that you can choose out of a jar that says, what would I like to do instead of this urge? Then we're ahead of the game, okay? I have an urge to get really angry right now, okay? And since you're self-talking and you know that, that's when we need to pull something out of our hat and say, you know what, would you like to go get your urge jar or your bag, which I'm going to talk about in a minute. So you have those activities, even like a popsicle stick, right? Just like chores that you pull out. This is our extra chores today. This is what you get. So put something on those. They can pull them out. Then they don't have to think, because they're not thinking. They're just barely on the edge of still self-talking and reasoning, but they're not over to an 8 out of 10 yet. Because after an 8, we're not self-regulated. So the point is we got to know, what number are you at? Well, I'm like a 7 out of an 8. I'm going to have a panic attack in about 2 seconds. Okay. What do you want to do about that? Okay. Sit down. Okay. Where do we do? And then if they can go back to a 5 by going outside, picking one of these things out of the jar, then that's the point, is self-regulating back to a 5, then a 4, then a 3. And they have to learn to self-soothe that in a good way themselves, because we're not going to always be there. Like I said, we just have to sometimes just sit in their space and then step back. So these are the toolboxes, a little bit more of a toolbox. So we've got the jar of the urge jar, now a feelings bag. So I have one in my office in the Orem office, but it's basically a dollar store bag, right? And I tell parents to go get a bag of 5 things that has to do with your 5 senses. And then you have it labeled, or a certain color, sad, mad, happy, so of course you're gonna have red, and you're gonna have happy, yellow, and you're gonna have blue for sad or something. And you put those objects in there. Now, car is one of the most important things. I have lots of parents that have kiddos that have a really hard time with change. So picking up, dropping off daycare, going to grandma, co-parenting. So when we have exchanges with kids and custody issues, we always want one of these in the car. So as soon as they get picked up, it's a good distraction, because most of the time we have to drive. Do you see the problem? We can't process things. But if you have time, take time to process. But if you have to get in the car, drive somewhere, as soon as you get in the car from the daycare, from wherever, then they can self-regulate in the car on their own with their bag. Mad bag's good. So just helping them bring their 5 senses back. So of course, anything that you can think of, but it has to be 5 senses. So there's a piece of candy in there, or some water, and their favorite little, treat or something. So they have something to get their smell going and their taste going. Now, something that smells good that they can sniff, great. A squeeze ball if they're mad. I don't, Play-Doh in the car, but whatever you need to do. So just the child picks out at the dollar store, and then he has his little things, and each one means something. Okay. Box container, a go-to for self-soothing. So that's just a container, just like the jar or something that says, what self-soothing activity do I need? Do I need a cuddle? Do I need a soft blanket? Do I need to go get my pet, animal? Do I need to have time one-on-one with mom or dad? Some self-soothing. So self-soothing, if you need more on that, on what that means, then watch my whole other webinar because it's really good. It has lots of stuff in there for self-soothing and understanding self-soothing, because teenagers self-soothe by self-harm and other things, and so we need to watch for those things. The car scene's really tough, where the siblings are fighting in closed areas and distracted. Yes, so that's the thing. Is there times where you need to pull over? Absolutely, if you can. But there's never a better time for a kid to bully their sibling than when you're on the freeway going 80. Am I wrong? No. So it's like, oh my gosh, what has happened? So when you're on the freeway, you can't pull over, and you model self-soothing. So music's great, right? That's why we have the bags in the car already. Hey, it seems like you're being angry, so why don't you get the angry bag out? And hey, Sally, why don't you get the sad bag out, because you were just yelling at your sister Sally and making her cry, So anyways, it's just something to distract, and it's a good self-soothing container of a bag of feelings, right? Something they can do, color, play with, anything that's distracting with their hands, and that's all you could do. And then say, hey, when I'm on the freeway, and then you repair it after you get home, right? That's unacceptable. What do we do about this next time? The car is off limits for that. It drives parents crazy. And the kids are the ones that are needing something at that time, but we can't give it to them because we're driving. So yeah, does that make sense? Yeah, it's like when I did foster care, and I had to do exchanges and visits with our parents, awful drop-offs and pickups. It was awful because they just had so many strong emotions because they hadn't seen their parents, and now they get to see them for an hour. Same thing with when you've got kids that go back and forth between parents after divorce. It's just not a happy situation usually, but we can make it that way. So we do a music collection, right? For different moods and emotion. We list the distractions. So that was back on here. So this one at the bottom where it says, what do you want to do not to act on your urge? So these are some examples. This is where we go into the list of distractions, choose a 10-minute activity, and put them in the jar. So put them in a toolbox so they can pull them out. So list of distractions, anything they choose. So they are learning how to self-regulate with distraction. Avoidances is something that is video games for more than an hour for a child, TV for more than an hour. Distracting is a 10-minute activity to an hour. So you plan ahead for strong emotions. That's the big one, okay? So your kid's gonna have a strong emotion. That's what this talks about too, is like expressing their feelings, managing tough emotions. So I call them strong, because strong is a 10 out of 10. That just means it's a strong emotion, and it's okay. But 10s mean, some kids hurting themselves or someone else. And that's my bar, is like, you're hurting yourself or others. That's a strong, that's and 11 is like throwing up or really getting in trouble. So with another, school suspension, stuff like that. So plan ahead for strong emotions. Just plan for them. And then, and then there's some of these things that you can do because you're going to plan for them. Like I said, plan for the car ride being a nightmare. And then we hopefully will get better with that. Okay. This is a little tiny handout. I know you're not going to be able to see this, but I put it on here anyways. But you can always go to my website and print it off. But this is my favorite, 5 steps to to emotional coaching for the basics. And this is out of Gottman's book, How to Raise an Emotionally Intelligent Child. We want emotionally intelligent children. So first we have to become aware of it. Then we have to recognize it and teach. And then we have to listen and validate and reflect. And I've talked about that in the understanding part. And then coach it, label it. What does this seem like? It is normal. I can see you. Here's 1 to 10. So it all goes along with the other handouts. And then step 5 is my favorite because it has 5 steps inside 5. And the last one, help your child find solutions and choices, encouragement, coaching, challenging, and processing the outcome with logical thinking, because we have to switch because we're all emotional. So we got to switch to wise mind and use logic too. And sometimes a good distraction helps. So put that in the solution list, jumping jacks, talking on the phone, whiteboard drawing, the emotion. I already talked about all those kind of solutions. So putting a distraction in a jar or in the mad bag or something will help, but it has to align with your family values. So if you really don't like driving with screaming, fighting kids in the back, and that's a value for you, I really like my driving and I love to drive, but I don't want kids screaming in the back. And that's kind of like, what, that's a bar that we can't cross. How can we do this better? How can we all get along in the car better? It's really hard for me to drive. Plus I'm going 75 on the freeway. It's not too healthy. It's not too safe for me to be, escalated when I'm driving because of the children, right? So things like that, come up with the solution, identify the goal. That's step 5. Setting limits, problem solving. There has to be a limit. There's no reason why we have to displace and bully and fight in the car, that's just an example. The references here, listening to shame, we talked about that a little bit, and I have a whole PowerPoint on that, but this TED Talk's really good. Gifts of Imperfection, Covey, 7 Habits, Emotional Intelligence, Goldman, and then Gottman. Siegel is one of my top 5. He's my top 5 authors of this one he has lots of strategies for the brain and how to nurture your child's development, which is a lot of emotional regulation. Don't let your emotions run your life. Feelings Buried Alive and Never Die. I have that one. That's a good one for adults. So anywho, let's see. Anybody have any more comments or needs in the chat?
Did you see the one for preteens using cell phones?
Say that again.
Have you seen the one that talks about, she said, is it healthy for preteens to use the cell phones as they're self-soothing? Is it appropriate to allow a cell phone to use in the car, drive from the other parent, or would it be wise to try to have a conversation?
Okay, well, yes. Is it healthy for them to do self-soothing with cell phones? It's not bad. It depends on where you're going, how long. It's basically an avoidance if you're doing it for more than 10 minutes. So you avoid having the conversation about how was this or how was that. But it's really not a good idea to bombard that teen if, when you're driving from the other parent. It's actually because when a kid feels trapped in a car, is that the best time to go on that side of the story? No. When I have my kids trapped in the car, I've talked about this before, that's when I ask great funny questions like, hey, so when's the last time you guys made out? Like yesterday? You know, but it's not about when they need some space and some time to process every pickup and every drop off. And so it's okay. I mean, as long as they do you do trap them later a little bit and say, hey, how was it? How are you doing? Is there anything we need to do tonight? You know, now that I have you back, what do we need to do? That kind of stuff. Does that make sense? The self-soothing presentation, the next one on here is our YouTube channel is just Blomquist Hill, all one word on YouTube, and you'll see it's called self-soothing presentation on there, the videos. And if you want any PowerPoints to this, you can always email me at Carol, CARYL at blomquisthill.com. And you can always go to my website to get any PowerPoints or handouts. All these handouts are actually on my website. Paper. Let's see. Yeah, teens and boundaries so create boundaries for teens that spend way too much time on their phones. Yeah, that's like an ongoing trauma with all of my clients and everybody right now. It's very, very avoidant. Teenagers are not sleeping. They're being very avoidant. You have to just, how do you create boundaries? Have them. So Wi-Fi limitations, boundaries with dinner time. There's certain rules that you just have on your fridge that say, these are our family values. We don't have phones at the table. We turn off Wi-Fi at 10 o'clock. Circadian rhythm and blue light is essential to get rid of blue light for circadian rhythm to happen. After 9, no lights, no food, no nothing. I would always say, the kitchen's closed at 9 o'clock. The same way. I mean, they're spending way too much time on their phones. There's a whole bunch of boundaries around what's really happening. And so what's happening is that there's a real thing called, electronic magnetic forces that are coming, and it's 5G, and it's really causing a lot of issues. And it's also it's completely avoidance and self-soothing with our cell phones as teens. Getting them away from them as much as possible here and there, a little bit at a time is all we can do. Move to a new home and the toddler in the home. What strategies have you found to best age during such a life transition? Okay, so they've moved and they have a toddler. And so that is a huge transition, by the way. It takes 6 months for the brain to repair and to get used to the new bedroom. So just know that 6 months, like sleep is going to be off. So basically anything that's routine, the same routine, the same pillows, the same things in their room, helping their bedroom, even a toddler, be the safest place in the house. And then as they kick and fight and have tantrums, which I celebrate, by the way, we didn't talk about tantrums very much, but how you celebrate those is you allow the child to have them, you sit in their space, and then instead of shaming or correcting or stopping their emotion, unless they're hurting themselves, that's different. But it's just know that those are going to happen, and it's not terrible twos, it's the transition, or it's their molars, or it's like so many things going on. They can't communicate, they don't feel understood, they're hungry, they're tired, they don't eat well. So the best thing is sleep. The best transition to help during this time is to make sure that child sleeps well. And there is a sleep hygiene, even for toddlers, on the YouTube channel too. So yeah, anything else? We're out of time, but we're good. Does anybody else have anything? Does that make sense to everybody?